Hello, hello, and welcome. This is Liz joining you today from Central Virginia and the unceded ancestral lands of the Monacan Nation. And I am so glad you're here with me today. And trust me, you're in for a treat because the whole reason this episode is even happening is due to an 81-year-old shamanic vulva living in exile in Berlin, Germany. That got your attention, didn't it? I thought it would. So let me explain. My guest today first appeared on my radar screen thanks to another former podcast guest, the amazing poet and performance artist Iris Eve. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, you might know that Iris and Trista Hendren of Girl God Books and I co-hosted an autumn equinox event in 2021 called Revelry. And as we were planning this event, Iris introduced us all to an incredible, provocative performance artist known by the stage name Growler, who is indeed a walking, talking, rather old vulva who transmutes women's pain through story, song, and comedy. Well, we were so lucky to have Growler join us for that event. And through that connection, I got to learn more about the amazing woman behind her. She's an incredible artist and she's here with us. And I know she has a lot of wisdom to share with us today. Dee Mulrooney is an Irish artist who's been living and working in Berlin for the past 6 years. Dee is primarily concerned with art as medicine, and she embraces a number of disciplines to engage with the healing aspects of creative art. Through painting, drawing, film, storytelling, and performance, she explores exile, displacement, longing, and belonging. Her art is fiercely authentic, and she leaves no stone of her own personal healing journey unturned. Dee works with the alchemical aspect of transmutation in her art, and she uses this process to deal with difficult topics, including abuse, death, and loss. She considers herself a shadow worker and has experienced the transformative power of sharing stories to heal the collective feminine. Dee has exhibited and performed numerous times in both Berlin and Ireland. She formed the feminist Cvnt Collective in Berlin, which I cannot wait to talk about. And she will be performing at Carja Sligo Arts Festival in July and Burning Woman Festival in Nottingham in June. And of course, Dee is also known for Growler, her alter ego and performance piece. Driven out of Dublin by rising rents and a poor quality of life, Growler has appointed herself the voice of the forgotten woman. Through Growler, Dee's performances explore femininity, classism, displacement, religion, the female experience, and Dublin social history. And with that, welcome, Dee, to the show. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Who is this woman? I want to meet her.
She sounds pretty great, doesn't she? I mean, it's a coup to have her here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I'm really I was having goosebumps there going to just, to be acknowledged in this space by a peer is just very, I feel really honored to be here, Liz. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for joining. I'm so happy that you said yes. And as so Dee and I chatted quickly before we hit the record button here. And I told her that I have this feeling of I just want to throw out all my notes and just start talking because I feel like this is going to be such a great conversation. But I usually start every one of these. And I'm also very curious about your background. I always start with just hearing about people's spiritual background growing up. And so if you're comfortable with that, I'd love to start there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was raised Catholic in a time where Ireland was dominated by Catholicism and patriarchy, where women's status wasn't very in good shape, to be honest. But my generation, I feel like we're kind of like a bit bridge generation. So I started to pull away from Catholicism quite early on, around 12. So once I made my confirmation, I was like, do I really have to go to mass? Because my mom had already kind of stopped going to mass at that stage, which was happening kind of all over Ireland, particularly I think probably in the cities more so, where there was more people going to mass. So you weren't noticed as much if you weren't going, So I wasn't connected at all spiritually, I'd have to say now, to Catholicism really until I started to make art. It is definitely the spirituality and religion of my ancestors. So in that I honor it. I don't identify as Catholic anymore. But for sure the iconography and just the imagery and the whole kind of visual aspect of it is very much embedded in my subconscious. So for that, I don't know if grateful is the word, but I'm very connected to it. I can't shake it off. It comes out all the time, even though I'm very angry and upset and devastated about, you know, all the stories, and including it's affected my own family. You know, my own family had members in institutions that were run by the Catholic Church and suffered abuse at their hands and stuff. But still, it's I think for a long time I felt like I wanted to completely deny it, you know, and I turned to all sorts of other kinds of spirituality, yoga and Buddhism and Tao and anything but where I was from, you know. So then when I started to work with the art and so on, these images just really wanted to come through, but they were definitely on my terms. It had nothing to do really with the Catholic Church. It was a deeper thing. It was more ancestral connection. That might change, I don't know, but it still seems to be there, you know, whenever I sit down to a piece of paper.
And do you think there's so in my head I think of Irish Catholicism as, I think of like the Celtic roots of Christianity in general, and in my head it's got a different feel than, say, perhaps from I mean, do you feel like there's that through line of you know, being present?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our saints were pagan deities that were just Christianized with the Catholic Church. And St. Patrick, you know, the belled St. Patrick, I don't have any time for him, to be honest, because he banned the Celtic practice of imbus for Osnai, which was basically invocation of divine inspiration. We don't know exactly what the practices were. It was probably shamanic, you know. I'm sure it involved some kind of ecstatic dance, maybe plant medicine, drumming, you know, all these ancient shamanic practices. There was definitely a practice that we had as a culture called imbus for Osnai. And St. Patrick banned it. It was like, you know, you can't do that anymore. So, and I think like what happened in those early days was it was actually very hard to convert the Irish to Christianity, because they were kind of going, sure, look, we're grand, you know, we have our cows and we have our land and whatever. So it wasn't really until it was sometime in the 500s when there was a terrible, like a mini ice age, where Europe suffered terrible famine for a couple of years, that people then turned more towards Christianity. And that's when it really took root in Ireland. So up until that point, it was kind of very much a mishmash and hit and miss and living, you know, side by side. But then the Christianity, the Christian church then just took over. From that point, it became much, much stronger. And I think, you know, they assimilated a lot of the very strong deities and made them into saints. St. Bridget in particular. I'm not wearing my Bridget's cross. I normally am, actually. You know, the Bridget's cross. So, you know, Bridget was a goddess. She's one of the strongest goddesses that we have. And I think they couldn't get rid of her, so they made her into a saint. And all this mythology then, Catholic mythology, grew up around her. That was kind of a crossover from, I don't think we're any one thing or the other. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually. And just even in terms of the complexity of what's happening in the world at the moment, I have a lot of time for humans. I really have a lot of time for human beings. I feel like it's nearly an impossible task to be a truly good human being. It's so unbelievably complicated. And we are as old as the little single-celled whatever that came out of the sea. We're as old as the earth. We're as old as, and it's complicated. You know, this kind of mycelium that we're discovering now that has conversations. It's like the forest internet. I feel that we give ourselves an awful hard time, and there's a lot of human bashing at the moment, and it's easy to use ourselves as a scapegoat, but I think we're part of a much bigger process. And Growler, my alter ego, she'd often say you need to love the Aegis out of yourself. You know, like the Aegis is an Irish word for an idiot or whatever. You need to love the Aegis out of yourself, you know. It's very hard to be human, and the older I get, the less judgmental of myself and other people I'm becoming, because I feel like nothing is black and white. Absolutely nothing is black and white. Everything is a gazillion shades of everything, and as old as the hills. So that's why I think, like with you know, the Catholic iconography and my work, it can appear contradictory sometimes, because I'm constantly giving out about the establishment. You know, I'm definitely a renegade and a dissident and a disruptive element, but I can't separate myself from my ancestors. You know, they're the prayers of my ancestors for going back a long time, because I'm genetically very Irish. You know, I've been there for a while, like in terms of my cellular memory. There's not much else going on here, a few freckles. So I feel like, what's the point in kind of blaming, or it just doesn't help. You know, there has to be atonement, obviously,
Yes.
for what has happened, but it's really, really complicated. That's not to diminish the terrible things that have happened or to let anybody off the hook, but yeah, it just kind of helps to, I think, have compassion generally for humanity as a whole, because it's almost an impossible task, I think, to be human.
Yes.
And to come out the other end and go, oh, I did a great job, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I've come to a very similar conclusion with you know, my Christian roots are Protestant in nature. So I've definitely, there's not much of a feminine presence there at all. I mean, you know, Mary barely exists, but for me, kind of connecting back to the Christian roots of my own ancestors has been really healing as well. And I don't know about you, but I also see it as a through line. I mean, obviously I'm very interested in the sacred feminine and who she was for my ancestral people. But to get there, I either have to journey backwards, you know, like through my people, or I got to skip over a whole huge chunk of them to try and find her. And so it's been an interesting practice for me to like look for her in those ancestral roots too, even in places where she might not be so obvious.
Where she was kind of squashed down, you know. It's funny, I'm living in Berlin now, and we've just bought a little piece of land with a group of other collectives just outside Berlin, kind of in Brandenburg, the surrounding areas. And there's a well close to where we bought the piece of land, and it's been there for like since the 1600s. And in Ireland, that would be a holy well. You know, all wells are holy wells, really. You know, all these little wells that exist naturally are holy wells, the holy wells of Ireland. They reckon there's about 7,000 of them, 3,000 that are listed in Ireland. And here, of course, there's lots of wells, but they're not feminized. So there's a plaque of a man like with a giant nose from the 1600s, you know, and it's his well. It's like, right, whatever. It's not for me. It's like, it's the female, it's the feminine holy well that's just been, it's amazing that it's still there and the water quality is beautiful, but it's just interesting to see what happened here. And that didn't happen in Ireland, actually. We didn't lose the thread of the feminine. We managed to hold on to it, you know, despite the Catholic Church and patriarchy's best efforts. I mean, what happened to Irish women was abominable. It's amongst some of the worst abuses that women have suffered anywhere on the planet ever. And I often wonder, like, why was it so ferocious and horrendous? I mean, you just can't believe some of the stories, you know. They've actually been locked away. That's why the stories have been locked away for another whatever 30 years. You know, they're trying to not allow these stories to come out into the public, you know. And I kind of wonder, like, at the same time we still had the holy wells, and you know, there's a great devotion to Our Lady in Ireland, and to the Rosary, despite everything. But how they did what they did to the women, and you know, in a fairly short space of time, you know, from the founding of the state, really. It was a terrible betrayal what happened. But I see here in Germany that the feminine is not so strong in that way, you know. The goddess culture is gone from here.
Yeah. I'm so interested in how this happened and played out in different parts of the country, the world too. Well, and I feel like you're also speaking to another thing that I like to just approach with guests, and that is your understanding of, I say the sacred feminine. I've had some interesting conversations with people lately who, you know, I'm not attached to that language, nor do I put that on anyone else. So I don't know if that resonates for you or not, but I'm curious about your experience of the sacred feminine. If, as you said, you know, that she was sort of present for you always, like as a spiritual force, or was there a time in your life that she came more forward, or how that's
Yeah. I know what you're saying as well about the language, because I feel like, at the moment I've kind of like, I have a bit of a what's the word, like resistance to a lot of the word sacred. It's like so overused,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not our fault, because
Yeah.
people are resonating with it, so they're using it. But it's a bit like love or peace, or it becomes like, what does it even mean?
Yes.
Um, and it needs to be picked apart a bit more, I think, to get to the heart of it, because the word in itself is so used that it doesn't feel what it is anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's like about this everyday sacred, like, and that's my work with Growler has really helped that, in that I definitely grew up like my grandfather, who I wasn't particularly close to, but he was so devoted to Holy Mary, he called her Holy Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this little prayer that was handed down from my grandmother that I didn't know. Well, I knew her up until I was 2, but she died of a brain tumor. And seemingly I was very close to her. And I've heard from many people that I'm very like her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Kitty was her name. And she used to say, Holy Mary, spread your blue mantle around little whoever it was and keep them safe and pure. Amen. And that was my bedtime prayer, So then when I got older, the prayer went, because, teenagers and rejecting everything or whatever. But I would go straight away to that prayer if I was worried. So she was definitely always present. And then I became involved. I won't get into it too much now, but I became involved very, very heavily. It's funny because somebody else asked me about it today, and I said, no, I'm not ready to talk about that yet in public, but I'll mention it. I was heavily involved in a cult, like proper hardcore cult, for years. And they did have a divine mother aspect to it. So, the divine mother has definitely always been present in my life. And it is, I'm not ashamed to say it, that it is Holy Mary. To me, she is like the embodiment of the feminine within the Catholic Church. For me, the only kind of selling point, and the history of the rosary and all of this kind of thing. It's just fascinating that it was almost like a dissident prayer at one stage. And I know the Protestants got rid of her and got rid of it. And the Catholics at one stage were like, oh, this is too much. They're into the divine feminine too much. We better squash that. So, the poorer people then had just little seeds in their pocket and they'd say the prayer. And we know that the rosary's roots now are pagan roots. Like it comes from the rose garland, it's the goddess worship and so on. So again, it's that thing of like, it's that continuous line, but I am kind of like, oh God, the word divine, the word sacred, the word spirituality, what does that even mean anymore? So for me, it's an everyday thing. And it is definitely an alive thing in my life. And Growler, she's living in Berlin. She's living in a bit of a skanky part of Berlin. And there's pigeons and there's rats. They're her spirit animals. She doesn't have eagles or jaguars or wolves even. She's with the rats and the pigeons, and the crows, all the kind of like punky animals. And she sets up her altars in really the darkest places, where there's these poor souls that have no homes or whatever, under bridges, in really busy motorways, because what being with her, it sounds like I sound like a crazy person now talking about her in the third person, but being with Growler, what has shown me is actually that the earth is still there beneath the concrete.
Yes.
She is still there. The holy wells are still there. They're bubbling up between cement and concrete, whispering, remember. Growler tells me this, it's still there. The energy is still there. You just need to connect with it. And the physical is just one plane. So, Growler would say, sure, listen, a rat has as much right to existence as an eagle. And we've as much to learn about, and actually a lot of resilience. Like there's a lot of resilience to living in a city. You see nature is like, dandelions cracking up between the skankiest place, like, and there's the dandelion. How are you? With their amazing medicine. Like dandelion is one of the most powerful plants in the world. And there it is. I'll grow anywhere, I'll take the shirt off any man's back. So it's like, I feel like everything is sacred. And I don't want to dilute the word, but it is actually. That's the thing. Everything is sacred.
Oh, I so feel that. And so I've got multiple thoughts here. One thing that popped to mind as you were talking about the dandelion, I met a guy a few years ago who told me that nature has a way of showing up and offering medicine to people, even if they don't know it. So he was giving me the example of these like psychedelic mushrooms that like show up in suburban lawns and people don't know what they are. And they just are like, mowing them over, but they're there as medicine. And so, dandelion there, as medicine for whatever that,
even
there's
for
all
the
kinds.
eyes, even for the
Yes.
eyes, it's just a little bright, like, look at them,
Yes.
They're so gorgeous.
The other thing I wanted to say about the word sacred, and it's funny because I love that word, but I hear what you're saying and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I wonder if part of it is the way in which capitalism gets hold of everything and sort of turns it into a sellable commodity, for example. So then we think we need a special crystal that came from halfway around the world that we'd have no idea what the ethics of, or how it was accessed and who got it and
white sage, Palo Santo.
Yes. And whose hands touched it on the way to reaching you, all of that. I wonder if that's part of the dilution of the power of that word too, because I totally agree with you. Like what is sacred is, can we find it in like the squirrel that's running up the tree outside of my house? It's certainly that would have been the way for our ancestors, right? They weren't shipping off to like, here, let me pick out this random crystal in a catalog and have it shipped to me.
And again, but again, I'm feeling at the moment for some reason just this huge compassion, even for that, because I'm like, God love us, we're so far removed from our being, from we are God dreaming itself into reality, I believe. It's for me, it's all one. And I know, again, I don't want to dilute that meaning either, but I'm feeling that more and more and more, and tapping into that, like I kind of feel, oh, God love us, getting the crystals and wanting to connect, like, so I think the antidote to that is to just connect wherever you are. Like, and I definitely had a crisis a few years ago of going, I need to get back to the land, Era, the ghost of Era. Like I was just obsessed with getting back to a field in Ireland. Like, and it was really hard. It was really hard for my husband, he was like, Dee, you know what that means? And you know what that means for our family. And I was kind of like on this thing, I'm only going to feel connected if I'm there, and actually that's not my path. So I've had to accept that my permaculture of the heart, that actually I am my own landscape. And ever since I've started doing that, I just noticed that my compassion is just blown wide open, for everybody. Like it's because when people are doing terrible things, it's because they're completely lost. Now, don't get me wrong, Liz. If I was in a bunker in Ukraine now and somebody was killing my family, I tell you, the rage I'd feel, it'd be Cali, and the hate, I'm not under any illusions, but I feel now that I spent a lot of my life definitely searching and thinking that I had to be on a specific kind of path in order to be good or to attain whatever. And I've kind of given it all up. I've basically given everything up except what I enjoy. And prayers that I enjoy, I say, if I feel like sitting by the altar, I will. And funny enough, since I've taken any kind of practice out of my life, I feel way more connected. Absolutely way more connected, I used to be quite like, right, I'm going to get up at 5 and I'm going to start yoga. And then, of course, I'd have this motivation for 5 days, and then I'd be on the beer and, smoking cigarettes on the balcony. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going, what am I doing? So, and I also have an autoimmune disease that I'm dealing with every day. So I'm kind of a moderation person. I'm a bit like Cinderella. I can't actually overdo it too much or I get really sick. But I was also trying to find answers to why my body was the way it was. And I've just given up. I'm like, it is the way it is. And I love it the way it is. It's messy and complicated and, unreliable. And all sorts of things happen all the time. And I'm just here. I'm just trying to really follow that joy. And I've noticed as well, this attainment for happiness, that's another thing as well that I've kind of given up, is trying to be happy. and more so realizing that the more I'm living my purpose, actually, the more satisfied I am. So it's more about satisfaction. And that's a very recent, what's the word? Realization. It's like, I was kind of going, why am I so happy at the moment? Why am I not craving anything actually? Um, Other than a bit of chocolate every now and again or whatever. Um, and it's because I'm definitely living my life on purpose, you know?
Mm.
And that's a total blessing. Doesn't mean that it's
Mhm.
going to be easy or that you're going to have plenty of free time. It doesn't mean that at all. But and I've also noticed that I'm really enjoying being around other people that are living their life on purpose, you know,
Mhm.
just
Mm.
finding their purpose.
Yeah.
And there's lots of purposes. I'm not saying that there's one purpose,
Yeah.
but there's lots of them. And that's really, it's satisfying more than happy, you know.
Yes, I love that distinction. Um, I love that you presenced compassion in that way too, of, non-judgment too, is what I'm hearing, just sort of acceptance of where we all are in this journey. And I want to talk to you about purpose then, and like what that looks like for you, and how that comes through in your, well, I was gonna say perhaps your purpose is your art, or tell me about your purpose.
Well, you know, I've always been very driven. Like I think I'm double Pisces with my moon in Taurus, but I used to think that I was Pisces Aries. And I do think there's an Aries in there somewhere because I'm really driven. I'm like, I came into the world ready to roll, you know,
Mm,
always doing something, but kind of a bit like, not like a headless chicken, because I definitely knew from a very early age, for example, that I wanted to be a teacher.
mm,
And that gave me a lot of, I've always had a certain kind of purpose, but this is a different thing. I always felt like, you know, when I was younger, I'm going to get somewhere. There's going to be a big magnum opus or something. I didn't know what it was, but it felt like it was something, just something bigger, you know, or I don't know, something's around the corner. And since I started making art, um, and really getting into the process of it and really going, oh my God, this is mad. This is actually medicine. It's not just like I'm
yes.
saying it. It's actually medicine. I've never been healthier. I've never been more energized. I've never, you know, like I've had really rough health crisis in my life, really bad. I'm one of those people that's either, you know, on their deathbed or just never sick. And then with the autoimmune thing, it's consistent and chronic. Um, it's had to be dealt with. And I don't know why, but I'm just like, I feel like I'm in my 20s or better than I was when I was in my 20s.
Mm,
So it's the energy really that I'm noticing. And I'm menopausal, like I'm nearly 50. So it's like, God, that's mad. I'm like, am I just gonna escape this, or maybe I'll crash or whatever? But I think it's actually the purpose thing, it's the energy. And so I would say, of course, like there's different aspects of our lives. Like you have kids, and you know, you're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a friend, but art is absolutely my happy place. Like I'm just in nirvana when
mm.
my favorite thing to do is to be there with a pencil and my notebook, listening to an audiobook or a podcast. And it's so pleasurable that I feel, this is my other Catholic side probably coming in, I feel guilty, you know. I'm like, this is so nice that I should be doing something else. Should make the dinner, clean the house, you know, whatever. Because I'm like, how can this be this good? I can't explain.
Mm,
It's kind of ecstasy.
mm,
I know sometimes musicians get it, you
yeah.
know, when they're playing, when they're performing, and when they're connecting with an audience. But I get that with a pencil.
Mm.
Take
I,
that the wrong way.
I, I love that. I love that. Um, well, and tell me about and I want to talk about Growler too, but let's keep
Yeah.
this thread, and I'm going to trust she's going to, that'll come back around. But and maybe this is where it will. Tell me about the feminine. You reference. I know you talked about the feminine, like shadow, but
Yeah.
also just the feminine in general. How does that play out in your art?
Well, I know, like I started making art because we basically had to move from Ireland because we lost our home that we were renting, and I was devastated. We were living beside my parents, and my mother has dementia, and I thought that was going to be our forever home. We thought we were going to buy that home, and the landlords wanted it back, and I just was like, I fell into a black hole straight away. and cried for weeks and didn't sleep for weeks. I've made the decision very quickly to move to Berlin because we had friends and my brother was here. So it was basically a survival thing, but that I started making art then. And because, you know, Richie, my husband, was like, Dee, you'll have to do something because I can't manage this level of anxiety. And I'm a highly anxious person anyway. I'm like rabbit in the headlights. I've got a very highly attuned nervous system, always have had. I'm a worrywart. But instead of, so and you know, therapy is a bit slow. Like I'm not against it, but this was immediate. I needed something immediately before I was going to have a breakdown. And I literally just started drawing. And that everything was all about the female. It was all about the feminine. And it was this thing as well of like finding out about what happened in Tuam. Tuam was a mother and baby home in Ireland where they found the bodies of 900 babies between the ages of 3 weeks and 3 years old, hidden in a septic tank, unnamed, in a septic tank, in a shit pit, essentially.
Oh, wow.
In one home. So there's estimated 9,000 babies in unmarked graves around Ireland. And they all died within a, you know, probably a 60-year period, or maybe even less.
Wow.
And I was listening to this report on the radio, and I started drawing the Virgin Mary with a massive vulva and turning into a tree, like the Mary tree, where the babies then. So basically, essentially, the image was that I wanted to imagine taking those babies out of that really dark place and putting them into clean earth. And also the irony of those women and what they went through, they were probably calling out to her. And yet she is used as this like oppressive icon of how women should be. So the complexity and the paradox and the duality and the weirdness of it all. And that's when I started to work with the shadow, because I'm quite an angry person, you know. I've some temper on me, like, and I've done things that were, you know, I don't know, shameful. I haven't really ever really physically hurt anybody, but I've got a pretty ferocious temper and a really bad tongue. Like when I'm dark, it's like expletives, Cali, get out of my way. You know, my boys are like psycho mother, basically.
Yeah, I know that mother. I'm familiar.
I'm psycho mother. I'm generally like this, so it's really scary when it happens, and the energy of it is so potent. So. And I'm surrounded by men. I don't have any sisters. I've got 3 brothers. They're all very gentle, actually. My dad is a total soft teddy bear gentleman that I was raised with, good men. My husband is lovely, gentle. And I'm this raging ball of anger most of the time. And like, I remember growing up and my dad was like, oh, don't talk to her, like close the door, or, you know, because I was I had a temper, you know. And then realizing this is shadow stuff. This is feminine shadow stuff. This is female shadow stuff. And my brother, who's like my twin, 9 years apart, I say, because I was a twin and my mother then miscarried one of the twins when she was pregnant. I think it was him coming back again 9 years later. He is the opposite of me. He is light, shining, bright, shiny, sunshine boy. And we're very, very close. And he'd always be saying, you're very angry, you know, like you want to be, can you not maybe, would you not do like a brighter picture or whatever? It's always very angry, you know, because my early work as well was very dark. And a part of me was going, fuck you. No, I can't actually. This is what's coming up. And like people relate to it. People are relating to this. And this is my medicine. I'm not doing it to hurt people. I'm not doing it to bring more darkness into the world. It's cathartic. And for some reason, it's transmutive, you know. I actually have a piece here that's been sitting on my desk for weeks because it fell out of my folder. But this is one of the pieces that you can see it there. This is like it's a Kali piece, and that's how I feel often about what's happening to women in the world.
Yes.
That's actually how I feel.
And can you describe her for people who are listening? Yeah,
it's a self-portrait, and it's equal amounts of sorrow and rage. And she's armless. She can't defend herself. She's being abused and raped and used over and over and over again. She's furious, but she can't do anything about it. She's wounded. And she's, you know, the vagina dentata, Kali. It's just a wild piece of how I feel sometimes. When I hear about, you know, Ukrainian women being raped by Russians, when I hear about what happened to the women in Tuam in Ireland, when I hear, you know, about random women just being killed for walking down the road, you know, like this is it.
Yes.
This is what I feel. And if anybody got in my way, let me tell you, but you know yourself, it's like female rage. I don't think the world even knows yet what's coming, because I think we're really in the Kali era. You are in the Kali Yuga. That's what the Indian mythology would say, is that we're living in the Kali Yuga now. We're in Kali's time. And, you know, what we're doing to the earth is a direct reflection of what we're doing to women.
Yeah.
And it's just abominable and devastating. It's devastating. It's the cause of everything, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm getting all worked up now. But when I made this piece, I was in Greece, and it was on one of those stupid little Ryanair like weekend away things that we were doing to bring our boys to see places in Europe. And I don't want to sound ungrateful, but the place that we went to, Thessaloniki, it's so beautiful and it's so old, but the beach was full of plastic. There was like little scabby cats going around, you know, homeless cats. There was a lot of really poor people there. There was a lot of people begging. There was a lot of, like, the plastic in the ocean, I thought was like jellyfish. And I was thinking to myself, what am I doing here? This is madness. This is not, like, what am I doing? I don't want to be a tourist anymore on the planet.
Yeah.
I want to connect with a place. I don't want to drop in on a terrible, environmentally unfriendly. So I actually made myself sick and I couldn't go out for 3 days. So my boys had to go out, like, and they went on a tour around Thessaloniki, and they were like, oh gosh, she's off on one, you know. And I drew this picture because I felt like this is what we're doing to the earth. This is what we're doing to the ocean. And this is how she feels sometimes, you know. She also feels like a soft meadow and hope, and, you know, whatever, she feels all that. But this is kind of, this is the shadow that I work with a lot. And I was a little bit afraid on and off, you know, because I was thinking, oh my God, is it going to damage me? Is it like, am I hurting my health, you know? Because a lot of people are very much in the light, you know, and that's, I've learned a lot about that. Like, that's very, very masculine in a way.
Yes, it
is. Know, bright, shiny sunshine. Let's just keep going, you know.
Yes.
And let's find solutions, and let's invent. Tech is going to save us, you know.
Yes.
I feel like that's all very, and there's a denial of the suffering.
Yes.
And I'm not afraid to go there, really. And I realized, actually, I can go there and I can come back again. And actually going there, my hand is held by her.
Yes.
Whoever she is. Maybe it's Kali. Maybe it's, I don't know, Mary Magdalene. You know, my hand is held by the reviled woman and prone. And I come back stronger and actually brighter, able to be more bright in my life, in my own life. So yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if it's all right with you if I might be able to put an image of that in the show notes so people who are listening,
of course I can send you.
I'll
send you a JPEG. Yeah,
it's quite powerful. It looks like, I don't know if those are flames coming out of her breast or, like, you know, she's got a lot of power, and her hair is like, reminds me a little bit of Medusa with it's not snakes, but it's
that's really what I was thinking. Yeah,
very fierce. And well, and I'm thinking about you know, that the rage that you're speaking to, and how it can be a lot of things. Like, it can be personal, right? If you've experienced trauma and anything that's happened to you that where you didn't have a voice. And I think it can be ancestral, like our mothers and their mothers certainly didn't have voices. And I don't know how you feel about this too, but I also think of it as, you know, if this is all like divine mother creation, then there is collective rage, and you being able to be a portal and a channel for that to safely move through is very powerful. It's a gift and it's an honor in a way. And I was going to say it's sacred, which I know how you feel about that word, but it feels very sacred to me.
I use that word sacred all the time. It's like, absolutely, I'm not going to stop using it, you know? Yeah. Spiritual. You know, I'm going to keep using that word as well.
There's hallowed, there's holy. I was looking up synonyms for sacred once, and, you know,
I actually like holy. I do like holy, you know.
I like hallowed too. That feels like ground, hallowed, you know, hallowed. Yeah. Yes. Well, so tell me about Growler and how she showed
Came
up
into
for
being.
you. Yeah, how she came through.
Such a funny journey, because we were having we organized an arts festival here, me and my husband and three friends, my brother and two very, very talented special friends here in Berlin, all Irish. And it was basically after a couple of years, me and my husband were like, okay, we need to talk about Ireland, and we realized how wounded we were. The exile thing. Like, we never expected to leave Ireland close to middle age with our young
Okay.
family, because we
Yes.
couldn't afford to live in a working
Yes.
class area, despite the fact that I was a, permanent whole time teacher in a very good school, and my husband was a carpenter.
Yeah. Yeah.
The life that was on offer was, to be honest, it was just grind and really, really hard
Yeah.
and cultureless in a way, because I don't know about you, but the suburbs are pretty soulless, and
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yes.
like you're resigned to just like, oh well, here's where you go into your box. And so coming to Berlin was a real opportunity for change. And after about 2 years, we started talking about Ireland. So we kind of came up with this idea to have this festival where we bring together all these Irish exiles. I don't know if they'd want to be called exiles, artists who left Ireland for one reason or another. And there's always pain associated with leaving your home.
Yes.
I don't care what anybody says. And Ireland is so beautiful, Liz. It's just,
It really
it's
is.
so beautiful. And it was so painful to leave there, because it's a kind of a magical place, but it's also got really, really dark, shadowy stuff.
Yeah.
And one of those shadows is housing. It's really a blight on the Irish psyche, because it goes back to the famine, it goes back to colonization. And now it's like one of the most expensive places to live in the world. And you've got, like, adult kids living in their parents' 3-bedroomed houses because they can't afford to move out. They can't even afford to have kids. I know it's not just happening in Ireland, but it's a particularly Irish kind of wound around housing and eviction and all these kinds of things. So craw was basically about craw is a term for a bird's neck or a bird's gullet, and something gets stuck in your craw. It means it's something that you want to say and you don't know if you should say it, because it's probably not an easy thing to say. But if it gets stuck in your craw, then it's like it's going to cause you problems. So we named the festival Craw. So of course, if you invite in the craw, you're inviting in the shadow. And it was a really successful festival. But at the time, I suffered from endometriosis, quite severe my whole life. And it came back in full force just before Craw. So I started bleeding around the beginning of May, and Craw happened in the solstice in June, and the bleeding didn't stop. And Growler was being born at that time. So imagine I had basically just been bleeding really, really heavily for 6 weeks, and in the build up to Craw. And I was working with all this dark, shadowy, feminine stuff, and like really on a mission, but I didn't really know what it was. And I at the time, I didn't really know how to protect myself either. I didn't know about, I'm not saying I know anymore now, but I definitely hold space in a way that's, I feel, protected. Whereas then I probably was wide open.
Yeah.
And my friend who made Growler, I'd asked her to make me a hand glove puppet, like that. I wanted to have a conversation with my vagina. And what would she say if she was an L bag? Bag is like a terrible word for a vagina in Ireland, for a vulva in Ireland. And she came back basically with the structure of Growler the next day, and she was like, Dee, I think it needs to be this. I think it needs to be the full thing. So it was very emotional. Like, I climbed into the costume and I immediately started singing Ave Maria, and Ava, who made her, started crying. Like, and we both got very emotional.
And so, so for people who haven't seen it, I'll make sure I'll put something in the show notes too, but it is a full-bodied vulva costume, right? Head to toe, you were covered.
Yeah. And also with a Holy Mary cape, and
yes.
like Wonder Woman. And so basically Growler up until that point had been an online secret, where I was an agony aunt, and I had drawn a picture of Growler as like, in what would an 80-year-old, well, at the time she was 79, she's actually 82 now. I said 81, but she's 82. But with an old vulva with like gypsy earrings, and she has a cigarette coming out of her. She's like, and Growler gives advice to people on my friend's online magazine. And my friend kept saying to me, Dee, you need to tell people who you are. Like, and I was actually, Liz, I was terrified. I was like, they're going to get me, like the establishment, the priests. I'm going to be attacked. My kids are going to be taken off me. Like I went to that place in my head because I realized a lot since then, like that was my ancestors, like, because one generation ago I would have been locked up for being who I am.
Yes.
So, but Growler came out at Craw. She came out at the festival, and the Irish ambassador was there. And I had a total meltdown in the middle of the performance. I forgot everything. I forgot my lines, and Growler just basically walked off after 5 minutes and said, "I've had enough." And everybody thought it was part of the act, and that the old crone vagina had had enough, you know. And she's walked off the stage, and everybody thought it was great. And I knew the minute I came off, I was like, Ava and my husband were kind of upset for me, you know, because they love me, and they were like, Dee, don't worry about it. And I was like, I'm absolutely not worried about it. I feel great, and that this is the beginning of something. And now I've had really hard gigs since then. Like I've performed to total silence, to people not getting it at all, on the back of a truck. I've you know, really put myself out there in all kinds of scenarios because I was getting to know Growler. I didn't really know what she was, you know. And I spoke to several friends of mine who were involved in kind of shamanic work. And you know, several friends who would be healers and who would be holding space and stuff, because, you know, a couple of times people had said to me, "Oh, you need to be very careful with what you're doing here. This is not a joke," you know. Kind of in a little stabby way. It wasn't really coming from a place of, it was more like, "Oh, you need to watch your step, you know. You're playing here, you're playing with fire," kind of. So, but I spoke to a couple of people that I really trusted, and then I spoke to Growler, and I was like, "Growler, what's the crack here? Like, what is this? What are we doing?" And I tried to give her up a few times because it was just too hard. And also when I'm out in public, I always make sure that I have a man with me, you know, like I have to have a big fella guarding the space, because I'm like, fuck that, you don't know, you know, some lunatic will come along. Like, I'm not an idiot, you know. So it's kind of involved then having, it's not just something that I can do on my own. And in fairness, my husband's really supportive. Like if I ever felt unsafe, he's like there, you know. And usually two people if I'm out in public. And then, so after a couple of really hard gigs where I came home kind of devastated, and I don't know what happened. It wasn't that I was poorly received. It was just, I was just devastated after the performances. I try and stop. I say, "That's it. You know, Growler, you're hanging up your flaps. You had a limited run." And then, I don't know, just she started to get a bit stronger, and I'd try and not do anything, and then she'd say something to me. It's like she talks to me, you know. And just one more, let's just have one more gig. And then what starts to happen then when I put on the costume is that I would actually it's not like an outer body experience, because I'm fully present, I'm fully there, but I'm also not. Like, there's also definitely a part of me that is somewhere else. And a lot of what happens in Growler is spontaneous. And when I'm in her, I feel like I'm in an ancestor. She smells like an ancestor. She smells like ceremony. She smells like fire and sage, and she smells like mugwort. She smells like dandelions. She smells like old tights. You know, she's like my granny's house or something that I never knew. And I feel completely enmeshed and entwined, and really, like, it's like I put her on and a part of me is really home. And as time has gone on, like, I'm like, oh my God, I love her. Like, I love her. She's amazing, you know. I love her. I love the costume. I really mind her. Like, I'm like, oh, you know, she needs a bit of TLC. And when she's going on the plane, like, she's with me. I don't put her underneath, you know. And I just feel really, it sounds like a mad thing to say, because I know she is me. And it's like saying you love a part of yourself, but that's okay too. She's changed my life. My fear of death, my fear of flying, my fear of a lot of things is gone. Like, actually just evaporated.
Wow.
Because of her, you know. And now things are really starting to happen, like, in a way that I had prayed for this year. You know, I said, look, I want to get Growler to a wider audience, because I think she has something to say. And I noticed as well that you know, people who really connect with her, like they really love her like I do.
Yeah.
And they talk about Growler like separate to me, you know. And after my performances, a lot of the time people don't know who I am, and that's great. Like it's a connection, it's a disconnect from the ego, you know.
Yes.
Really healthy, like for me as a performer, to not you know, for that not to go to my ego or whatever, you know. So she's separate and she's not, and I feel like she might have a limited run, I don't know, but for now it's like it's a constant tap of flow. And I mean, I don't have enough hours in the day to record everything that she says and does in the songs. It's like a backlog of, I have enough for 10 shows, like I have enough for 10 hours. A girl could just start and do 10 hours, you know.
Yes.
So yeah.
Wow.
So I feel really, oh my God, very, 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 very lucky that this has happened at this point in my life, you know.
Yes. And I just want to witness or just say to you, I mean, from this side of it, you know, stepping into a character, just saying yes to her, you know, for wanting to show up and be so forward. I have to imagine that takes a lot of courage, You could probably come up with 50 reasons why you'd say, no, thanks. This is hard. I'd rather show up in a different way. But you said yes. And I think that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was those times where it was going, what the fuck am I doing? This is madness, you know, like going on the back of a bus or a trailer that's moving, you know, with no microphone, and like in crowds, like for protests and stuff, you know, for pro-choice rallies and stuff, which I think there's definitely a place for Growler there, but you know, showing up as at the bottom of the pile, you know, as a performer starting late in life. I'm, you know, I only started being an artist a few years ago, and a performance artist like only since Growler was born, you know.
Yeah.
So starting at the bottom, feeling like I don't have to do this. This is, what am I doing? You know, this is mad. I'm putting myself at risk here. Sometimes it has felt like as well.
Yeah.
Not so much now, because I know now what, I don't mean I know what she is, but I know now I've very boundaries, you know, around where I'll play and how I'll play, and it's definitely theatre performative space.
Yeah.
It's not at a rowdy gig with drunken people, you know.
Oh,
it's
no.
it's not that, but I did do things like that because I didn't know.
Yeah.
In the early days I didn't know. I was like, you know, I would get invited and I go, yeah, sure, this is great, you know. And it was that they were hard. Those gigs were hard. So it's nice that you're saying, yeah, you showed up. I mean, it's just mental when I think about it. Sometimes when I stand back and I go and I look at Growler, I look at the things, it's absolutely bonkers that I've ended up doing this. I don't even know why or where it came from. It's like the opposite of what a good Catholic girl should be doing. You know, I mean, people see, and I'm not a good Catholic girl, but you know, it's like, I guess it's heretic, blasphemic, you know, whatever.
Yeah. And so needed. Well, God is so needed.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we need more blasphemy. Please bring it on. Well, and I'm curious, you know, I know that you have mentioned elsewhere that you're interested in this idea of activism, art as activism, or artivism, as you would say. And I wonder, like, when I hear you describing Growler, I think of her in that way, but I wonder if you would say the same, or how you would kind of describe that idea of artivism.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think I've always been drawn to that, like, because I've always been an activist, you know. As soon as I could start going to protests or whatever, I'd be going, and I would identify, you know, as, not anymore, but I would have identified as left wing. And you know, like, politics now for me is a different thing. But no, I'm not. I'm not. I don't want to get into politics, but you know what I'm saying. There was a time where it was like clear what these things were. Now it's just, like I said, it's a big, crazy, entangled mishmash.
Yes.
I'm a human being alive on the planet, trying to be good, you know, and live some kind of a meaningful life. That's what I'm doing. So not that I don't think there is a place for politics or all of these structures. I mean, we're still in the process of using them, and therefore I think it's absolutely worthwhile to have good, conscionable people in there, you know, on behalf of others. I absolutely believe that. But I do think there's also a role for artists, and of course, not every artist has to be an activist, but I definitely am. And I don't, you know, I don't I draw, everything that I draw or everything that I make or everything that I do is coming from my own thoughts and experiences and interactions with the world. And it tends to be, I guess it tends to be, yeah, activist and political, I suppose, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to shy away from that, regardless of what effect that might have on my career. You know, as I said, I'm a late bloomer. The one good thing about being a late bloomer is that I don't really have any grand expectations, you know. I'm not like, I don't have a trajectory or here's where I want to be in 5 years' time. It's just like, this is an amazing ride. This is great. I'm having a great time. And in the process, trying to get across how I feel about life.
Yeah, there's something about that that feels very, you know, if we're going to use the terms feminine, masculine energy, there's something about that that feels very feminine energy to me too, just following the flow, not trying to put guardrails on it. It's got to go here, but just allowing it to be.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I ask you too, before we run out of time, I've got to hear about this Holy Cunt Collective. Please tell me what this is.
Yeah, so Holy Cunt is Ava Garland, my friend Yagama, Liliana Velasquez, Nessa Finnegan. Who else am I? I'm going to forget somebody now. Really obvious. Ava, Nessa, me, Yagama. That's it. Yeah, and there's more. So it's basically, you don't need to name all those people, but they're my sisters. They're my sisters in crime. We are definitely the renegades and the dissidents. You know, like the scurvy elephants and the pigeons and the foxes, the urban foxes, honoring the divine sacred feminine. Actually, that's what we say. That's our mission statement, in whatever way we deem appropriate and in whatever artistic expression. So, you know, we have burlesque artists, we have stand-up comics, we have puppet makers, we have painters, we have, you know, performance artists. It started with me and Ava at the very beginning. Me, Ava, and Yagama, who we'd worked together before, and Ava had made Growler, and then we just decided to have an exhibition. And it was, I think the first one was in 2019, and I think we've had 5 since then. And now it's just getting bigger. The collective is getting bigger, which is kind of really nice to see it blossom and new members come in. And working together, and it's a total joy, and it's hilarious, and it's great fun, and it's, you know, the cunt in all her magical mystical glory, and it's kind of mad. Our last shop that we had was pop-up shop and performance, and just some of the things that were made, you know, it's really, it's hard to, it's like not polished. There's absolutely nothing polished about us in that kind of, you know, not that I'm against yoni steaming or anything like that, but not polished and not precious. You know, we're there messy. We're mothers breastfeeding. I'm not anymore breastfeeding, which is a long time ago now. But you know, there's that kind of messy rawness, I suppose. And it's just great. I just love them. I love every single one of those women, and it's so much fun as well. Actually, it's just so much fun. So we're really starting to kind of get momentum now. And we have a very big festival coming up, 48 hours in Neukölln in Berlin, in a very popular venue. So we're going to take over the venue for the whole day. And Growler will be there, banging her drum, calling everybody to attention.
I wish I were in Berlin. I'd like to come.
Yeah, it's going to be great fun. There's also another next week in Ireland, actually, the Period Revolution. It's the first festival of its kind in Ireland, and it's run by Kitty Maguire. I can send you the link maybe, because there's going to be some amazing performers there as well. And the whole weekend is all about the feminine. There's going to be red tents. There's going to be yoni jewelry, paraphernalia. It's a whole festival for the yoni, for the vulva, for the cunt, you know.
Yeah.
And then at the end we're having a cunt cabaret. And Kitty really has helped me to take back the word cunt, you know, because in Ireland it's used as a really bad word.
Yeah,
and
same here.
Irish people, we curse a lot, like, you know, it's part of our vernacular. And that word is just used. It's like the worst thing you can say to somebody, you know?
Yeah.
Yes. So Kitty has really taken it back. and in just a really juicy, healthy way. And it feels really good now. I don't have any negative connotations with it anymore. It's like, yeah, no, I'm saying this word and it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, so that's happening next weekend in Ireland, and I'm really excited about that as well.
Oh,
So
I love that. Yes, if you share the link, I'll put it in the show notes, although this might air after it happens, but people
yeah,
could still go and read about it. And
yeah,
I'll look around, but I'm pretty sure the word cunt has origins in the sacred feminine too, like so many words to describe females that started eventually having sacred connotations. So I know
yeah,
I've read that. So I'll put that in the show
yeah.
notes too. I'll dig that up and put that in the show notes.
Even the word gossip, the word gossip
Yes.
meant women having a chat.
Yes.
Like, everything, yeah. But sure, we know that story, how it all went, and the witch burnings and
Yes.
everything. We didn't even touch on that, but
Oh, I know. Yeah.
yeah, there's hours and hours of.
I know. Much we could cover. Oh my gosh. Well, I just want to thank you for your time. This was such a wonderful, I don't like that. That's the wrong word. I started to say delightful, and that feels a little precious. Whatever. It's a great conversation.
No, it was
Really
absolutely
good.
delightful. I'm in great form. I'm
Mm.
really honored and kind of like um humbled, like, to be here and to talk like this for an hour about my work. It's just like, why would I not? It's amazing.
Oh, wow. Well, it's a privilege to be in conversation with you. I'd love to share, some of your art on, I'll put some in the show. We'll talk, and, I'll put some
Yeah,
links in the show notes, and then also on social media, if you follow me, especially on Instagram at Home to Her. I've got a Facebook group too, also Home to Her, but I'll share some there as well. How can people find out more about you?
I've got my website, which I can also put in the links, and then all my handles on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok are at Dee Mulrooney, Dee Mulrooney.
Okay. Okay.
Actually,
All right.
sorry, Growler's on TikTok. I'm
I,
not
I'm
on TikTok.
I'm
I can't go
speechless.
there.
Yeah, I'm very impressed. If
Growler's on TikTok. She doesn't have many followers yet, but she's pretty ambitious. So
I love it. I'm like, okay, if Growler can figure it out, maybe I can one of these days. Every time I go there, I'm like, nope, I've got to leave.
so fast,
So fast. I know.
Yeah.
Well, Dee, thank you so much for your time and for being here with us. I'm so
And
grateful.
you, Liz, really very much appreciate it. And I really appreciate your lovely professionalism and organization. It was absolutely a pleasure. And the structure as well of how you do the podcast. I'm really impressed and inspired. So thank
No,
you.
thank you. Thank you. It's a joy for me to do this. And I want to thank everybody, as always, for listening and watching. If you're listening, don't forget, I do have a channel on YouTube called Home to Her. I'm not promoting it as much just because I'm so used to the audio, but especially if you know anybody who's hearing impaired and they want to access these conversations, they can find it there with captions. Or if you're just really curious what Dee and I look like as we're having this conversation and you want to see us, you can hop over there too. And as always, listen, if you like the show, please subscribe or give it a good review or tell somebody about it, do all those things. And until next time, take good care. I'll talk to you again soon.